Welcome to the Athletic FC podcast with me, Ayo Akinwolere. It was a thriller at St James's Park as Liverpool nicked it in the last minute thanks to teenager Rio Ngumoha. Newcastle showed spirit, but it's fair to say that this squad could do with a fair bit of work before the transfer window closes in a week's time. All right, for this one, we've got George Caulkin. We've also got Ollie Kay as well. George, we have to start with Newcastle on this one. You were at St James's Park last night. Newcastle fans were fired up for this one. Can I say that the Isak situation potentially fueled this?
Totally. I mean, it was always going to be a big game. It was always going to be a great atmosphere on a bank holiday at St James's Park under the lights. But yeah, I mean, Alexander Isak was the undertone. It was the overtone. It was all the tones. The game started off with a kind of brilliant display of unity, that message of togetherness from War Flags, the fans group off the pitch, saying that a club is about more than one person. But obviously that was directed at one person in particular. And it was just one of those force of nature occasions at St James's, brilliant, brutal, noisy, where you feel like the team and the crowd are in harmony, kind of pushing each other on. It was a great game of football. It didn't go the way that Newcastle would have wanted, but there was symbolism everywhere. There was Alexander Isak not there. There was the man who's been replacing him as a false nine getting sent off. There's Ekitike scoring, one of the strikers who got away for Newcastle. It just had a bit of everything, but it was a phenomenal occasion, a phenomenal atmosphere. The thing that I can't get my head around is that Alexander Isak chose to sit that game out. I mean, I cannot get my head around it. It was just a brilliant atmosphere, and the kind of stage that his talent was made for.
I mean, Ollie, this game had it all. Red card, spirited comeback, and a last-minute winner from that lad, 16-year-old Rio Ngumoha, who became Liverpool's youngest ever scorer. What did you make of it?
Yeah, what a moment for him. I mean, it seemed like it was going to be a night that was all about Newcastle's defiance, and to an extent, it was, in terms of the way that they fought back, and as their players were dropping like flies, or Gordon sent off, Tonali injured, and then it ended up being all about a 16-year-old. I mean, my 16-year-old daughter's just done her GCSEs. She's wonderful, apple of my eye. But the idea of her or any other 16-year-old being put into that enormous high pressure situation and just doing something that just kind of
Newcastle have a case to get that goal chalked off simply because it was beyond his bedtime? I mean, there must be.
I'm sure there's some petitions there, George. There's some petitions already being put out.
They must be looking into this.
It was about. Well, it must have been getting off at 10 o'clock by then. It was just brilliant. And I thought when Slot brought him on, and this is just typical sort of somebody watching it on the sofa, without the extensive coaching experience of Arne Slot, I was thinking, that is mad, putting two really small players on, Harvey Elliott and Ngumoha, on into a hostile atmosphere where the story of this game has been your team being aerial bombardment. You've got a 6'4" new signing from Italy, central defender, on the bench. Why are you putting him on? Why are you putting this 16-year-old on? What's he going to do? And I know he's brilliant. I've seen him, watched him quite carefully the last 12 months or so. His reputation kind of goes before him, but I did not expect that. And even before the goal, he seemed to be willing to take the fight to Newcastle in a way that others hadn't been on the evening. And then that goal, it was amazing. It was one of the it was one of the great Premier League moments. I don't think it was necessarily quite as epochal as Jamie Carragher was suggesting, greatest game ever, but it was certainly it was a huge moment and a really, really dramatic ending.
Yeah, George, you have to feel for Newcastle because Liverpool weren't really at the races. If you look at that match yesterday, they had 0 shots between the 46th and 100th minutes, despite playing against 10 men. Should Newcastle feel hard done by on this one?
I thought they were exceptional. Yeah, I thought they were the better team with 11 players, and obviously then, recovering from Anthony Gordon's, bad challenge, they became the better team again. I mean, Slot afterwards talked about complete chaos, and he said as well, we were the lucky ones to get it over the line, and it didn't feel like a just reward for Newcastle in terms of the way they approached the game. I think people have been looking at them with these first two matches, a difficult fixture at Aston Villa on the first game of the season, and then at home to Liverpool, the Alexander Isak thing hanging over them, and people looking for signs of fracture, for signs of disharmony. Would be easy to kind of find excuses for what's been going on off the pitch. And when I say that they're an exceptional team, I do mean that in the kind of most old-fashioned sense of the word. They are a real proper team, and yeah, I thought they were really, really good. The way I've written about it in The Athletic is that they were kind of inflicted with losses all over. I mean, they lost the game, they lost Gordon, as you say, they've lost Fabian Schär, they've lost Joelinton, they've lost Tonali. That's a large part of the spine of their team, and yet you don't watch them and think of them as losers. You watch them and think that this is actually, this is the kind of mentality of winners. They need to start translating that into victories, of course, and at the end of it, they've left themselves with more work to be done in the transfer market after a testing summer. But it's very, very difficult to criticise them for anything last night, apart from the sending off, because they were just so good.
Yeah, for sure. On the flip side, should Arne not be worried, Ollie? I mean, defensively, Liverpool definitely do look vulnerable, but also that fluidity that we'd expect, even with the new signings, we haven't quite seen it yet.
Well, we saw it for the goal. I thought the goal was the winning goal was a brilliant move, but it was a move of a type that they'd not produced all evening. I would say the big thing is control that Liverpool haven't had in the first two games. Went 2-0 up slightly, luckily, against Bournemouth, and very fortuitously, I would say, against Newcastle. In the first two games, in both occasions, sort of inexplicably, really, they were dragged back into a 2-2 situation and sort of won it in a scrambled way in stoppage time on both occasions. It's nothing like they were playing last season. And when you look at, well, there are various issues. One is the sort of change of personnel with new signings coming in, and with the centre forward that they want still not through the door, the central defender they want still not through the door. It's a new look Liverpool team. People are finding their way. Kirkes was struggling at left back. Kanate, I think has come out of the blocks very, very slowly this season. They've not had their first choice midfield pairing so far. I don't think it's close to the disruption Newcastle have had, but then you look beyond that and you think, well, they've also had the Diogo Jota situation to deal with, and we've said a number of times that we have no idea how that's going to affect those players over the course of a season. I don't think that's what's going through their mind on the pitch from minute 1 to minute 90 or minute 101 or whatever it was last night. But it might be weighing heavily on players on the training ground, in the dressing room, Monday to Friday, and that can have an impact. So I think Liverpool have got a lot going on. There are reasons why things haven't exactly, or potential reasons why things haven't looked very controlled. But their performances have not been very good, really. But you look at the fact that they've won those two games in pretty, I don't know, would you call it resilient or would you call it heroic? I don't know. They didn't look very resilient sort of minutes 60 to 90 last night. They looked like they were really on the ropes in a situation where they should have been in control. So it's a strange situation. I think it's hard to evaluate.
It's their fans were singing a very obvious chant throughout the night, which was just champions, and that it's it's the biggest cliche in the book, but that is what champions do. They find a way. The fact that they've started the season with 2 wins from those suboptimal conditions, as you say, Ollie, is impressive in its own right. Because if you're not at your best, if you're not at 100% fitness or match sharpness or whatever, find a way of grinding through it. And they did that. It wasn't pretty against Newcastle. I do think they had a lot of fortune, but to get through it and to get through it with a win, does speak about their own spirit and their own quality as well. So, I mean, it's that's impressive in its own right.
Yeah. George, just a quick one before we move on. Does it worry you? I know we're not quite sure where the transfer window is going to go for Newcastle in a week's time, but does it worry you that despite the greatness of last season and when Newcastle find themselves this season, it still feels as if they haven't hit the ground running when it comes to having stuff in place for the new season ahead?
Yeah, I mean, Eddie Howe said last night that it already feels like this season is going to challenge them in new ways, and that that of course is a concern. Having said that, they spent the first half of last season really wading through treacle. I mean, they started off with an unsettled dressing room. If we remember, Anthony Gordon had his head turned by Liverpool. All of that PSR stuff had really taken hold in the dressing room. There was a sense that everybody was up for sale at a certain point, and it was a proper struggle for how to turn that round. They were indifferent in terms of results. They were indifferent in terms of performances. There were some big moments off the pitch where he had to take players, including Isak, and really remind them of the basics. And, I spoke to someone very close to Eddie Howe towards the end of the season, and he said people will never know how difficult that was for him and his coaching staff last season. Now, the way it ended, of course, was with that extraordinary moment at Wembley. They win their first domestic trophy for 70 years. The team then, somehow finds a way to, I wouldn't have cared, as someone who's watched Newcastle all my life, I wouldn't have cared if Newcastle had lost every single game beyond that. But they then took it up another notch and qualified for the Champions League. I mean, astonishing. But the first half of the season was difficult and a challenge. So I'm not worried in the sense that they are very, very well equipped at dealing with adversity and bouncing back, and they have an astonishing spirit in the dressing room. And as I say, a team in the most sort of traditional, old-fashioned sense of the word. I am concerned that, they haven't got the results that they should have got from these first 2 games, and that now they have even more work to do in the transfer market. My concern is not about Eddie Howe. It's not about the players they have. It's just that circumstances haven't been very kind to them so far.
Okay, well, let's see how that spirit is tested as we'll discuss the latest on the situation of Alexander Isak with the one and only David Ornstein. Well, the future of Alexander Isak has been the talking point of the summer, it's fair to say. With less than a week to go in the transfer window, we've roped in David Ornstein just to give us a bit more chat on it. David, are we any closer to a resolution on this? Because we can't stop talking about it.
Well, it was Eddie Howe pre-match and actually post-match around the Liverpool game who said there's no update. And that is the case at the time of recording, because there is no decision either way. Newcastle have been very firm in their stance that they don't intend to sell him this summer, but equally they've been exploring the market for reinforcements in the event of him going, but also to bolster their attack full stop. In an ideal world, of course, they wouldn't be here, and they would, at the very worst, reintegrate him into the squad once the window closes. But we're not in an ideal world, and he has made clear his desire to go, and pretty forcefully. And as far as we know, that stance remains unchanged. We at The Athletic have got no evidence to suggest that he is reconsidering his position. He's not training with the first team squad. He's not available for selection for the time being. And there's no indicator that his stance, from speaking to sources all around this situation, is going to alter. If indeed the window shuts and he remains at Newcastle, then of course everybody can cross that bridge when it comes to it. And so it's a really difficult situation. I think the outlook remains as it was before. If Newcastle are able to get some reinforcements that they're satisfied with, and an offer comes in to their satisfaction from Liverpool, then potentially a deal will get done. However, there are a lot of ifs in that, and there's no guarantee that it will happen. And so at this moment in time, all eventualities remain open. Him staying at Newcastle, whether or not that's against his will, him leaving Newcastle, that is his desire at the moment, as we're led to believe, and he has made clear on his Instagram statement, and Liverpool's wish to sign him. Although they have not come forward with a subsequent offer after that £110 million bid, their desire to bring him to Anfield is thought to be ongoing. And so every conversation I've had suggests that now that this game, Newcastle against Liverpool, is out of the way, it was always anticipated that things will be resolved post that. We are now in that period, so we could see developments any moment, any day, and it could even go down to the absolute wire on deadline day before we finally get some clarity on what has definitely been the biggest talking point of this summer transfer window. And if we don't get an outcome that people are satisfied by, then maybe we'll do it all again in January.
Please, God, no.
We don't want to be here in January talking about this, surely. But the thing about the Isak situation, David, is, do they need to sell him in order to do more business for strikers? Because Callum Wilson's also gone. So they also do need reinforcements in general, not just in that elite level, but maybe even as an understudy or someone that can come in through injuries and stuff like that.
Well, Newcastle have done a lot of heavy lifting in the last year or so to improve their financial fair play, PSR situation and compliance. We all saw that they were unable to do any business. They came into this window able to do business. And as we've made clear throughout, they fully expected Alexander Isak to stay in their mind. That was their wish and preference, especially after qualifying for Champions League football. We have since learned a lot of information about the situation that we didn't know at the time. However, Newcastle were intending to spend to enter the market to recruit, and there were some finances available. We saw that in the case of Anthony Elanga, of Aaron Ramsdale, obviously a lower cost deal, of Jacob Ramsey. And I do think there is scope to do more business, say, Johan Wissa, Jürgen Strand-Larsen, or whoever they have decided to go for as that Callum Wilson replacement. But yeah, if there's going to be further higher spending after that around the squad, whether it be a new number 9, whether it be in other parts of the pitch, of course, for their continued PSR and financial fair play compliance, the level of money that an Isak sale could generate is critically important, because we've talked so much about their revenues. They're not as high as the other clubs yet. We've seen what a difficult and distressed financial situation they have been in since the initial heavy investment under the new ownership and Eddie Howe. But Newcastle would prefer to have Alexander Isak at their disposal as opposed to the money. One thing I would say about the money he could generate is that the ownership, led by the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia, will have to think very hard about this, and they are, I'm sure, because despite being on paper the wealthiest club in world football, whether people like it or not, they have to comply with football's financial rules. PSR in the Premier League and FFP on a UEFA level. And that means they have no choice but to run Newcastle United as a business. And that's why, potentially, in no small part, they may have to reluctantly consider his sale, as well as the fact that he wants to go. So the finances involved in this are absolutely essential to the bigger picture and the story. And apologies, I'm still wrestling with a hungry dog here.
Selling has always been part of the plan at Newcastle. Selling has always been part of what, they've recognised that will have to happen at some point down the line post-takeover. They were saying, even at the moment when they signed Bruno Guimaraes, they were saying, if this guy gives us a couple of years, we double our money on him. That's part of what we have to do. Now, the way things have gone at Newcastle from that first extraordinary transfer window in the January post-takeover, when they spent, whatever it was, £92 million, more than any other club club in Europe, to qualifying for the Champions League way ahead of schedule, to the injury to Callum Wilson, which is what made them do the deal for Isak in the first place, to bringing forward the purchase of Anthony Gordon because they thought they could take advantage of what's going on at Everton. There's always been this sense that they've had to delay the sale, and that reached the point last summer when there was that awful sort of debacle of the PSR scramble when they ended up selling two really good young players, and nobody wants to be in that position again. The problem is, it's like even though it's always been part of the plan, they come to this summer, they're now trophy winners, they're back in the Champions League again. And so the idea of selling their best player at precisely this moment is kind of anathema to them. And that's something that's always happened. That seems to have happened repeatedly post-takeover. At some point, though, they will have to get their heads around selling one of their big players and then reinvesting that money. It's just the thought of it being him right now is very difficult to accept.
George, how damaging has this been, the whole Isak situation? The optics of it from the outside looking in don't look great, but there is still a bit of a power tussle here, right?
Yes, it's both sides digging in. I mean, it's hung over the club for way too long. I mean, it's damaging. Yes, it is damaging. It's sad. I mean, first and foremost, this extraordinary player who scored against Liverpool in the cup final back in March, thereby cementing his place as a Newcastle legend. I don't use that word lightly, but when you've not won a trophy for so many years, it's like instant legendary status. And it has been very sad. The sourness is that I think if he'd come out at the start of the summer or at the end of the season and sort of said, thank you so much to Newcastle, what a season, you've helped me so much, we've made history, but now is the time for me to move on and do something else, I think this would have felt very different. But by refusing to play matches, by training alone, the damage is, I mean, it's sort of difficult to measure, but it's just lingered on and lingered on. I mean, I'm in those circumstances. I think the way Newcastle have played has been very impressive. But they're going into the Champions League. This was supposed to be the summer that, after 3 transfer windows, without adding to their first 11, that they had some money to spend. They're going into the Champions League. It should be one of the best moments in their history, and they've had this sort of sourness around. And there's all sorts of things that we can kind of go into, the reasons for it. One thing is pretty obvious, which is that Newcastle, the team, have far outstripped Newcastle, the club. They're not the big payers. Sadly, they're not at Liverpool's level. They're not going to be challenging for the Champions League and the Premier League season upon season. Not yet. That's where they want to get. They don't have the infrastructure of a Liverpool or a Man City yet. And again, obviously can't criticise Eddie Howe for that. I mean, the way he has performed and his team have performed has been astonishing. But also wider in the transfer market, they've attempted to go head to head with the clubs that they feel like they're on at the same level with, and they haven't been able to kind of do it. So it has been a tough summer. And, they haven't got a CEO, they haven't got a sporting director. That's not the way big clubs operate. And so it's been a mess.
Where does that put you, as someone who's followed the club for ages, someone who's seen Newcastle struggle, come back to glory, and are finding glory again? Does that put you in a quite precarious situation because you don't quite know whether you can get excited for the future ahead?
So, I mean, I've said this before, and it'll sound stupid. And if, like, Liverpool fans listening to this, they maybe they just won't kind of understand this, but like for my entire life, it's all been about winning something. So I was born in 1970, so that's the year after Newcastle's previous trophy, the Intercity Fairs Cup, which of course doesn't exist anymore. And so for me, it's always been about a trophy. And there's, that's always been the feeling that's what they should do and I want them to do. And, they got close on occasions, some amazing moments under Keegan and Sir Bobby and that. And then it just disappeared into the horizon. The reason I'm bringing that up now is that I never thought of there being existence beyond winning something. It's like I hadn't ever thought that there would be a match after winning something. It sounds stupid, but like for me, it was like the cup final was the full stop. Winning something was a full stop, and as I said earlier, I can't get my head around the fact that Newcastle then had to play games the following week and the week after, and that they actually won those games. It's like, so part of me, as someone who's watched the club all my life, I don't care what happens next, because the bit that's always been missing, I've seen it happen, and it was incredible. But of course, the season rolls around and it was like, oh, yeah, okay, I'd quite like to see them do that again now. It's like, imagine if I was actually there and was capable of soaking up what happened. I mean, I still don't believe that Newcastle played better than Liverpool, because I couldn't get my head around Newcastle being good in a cup final. Anyway, that's a very kind of long-winded way of answering it. I do think this summer has been sad. That's my feeling about Isak. He's a astonishing player. Newcastle fans have been very, very lucky to watch him, to witness him. But Newcastle have also developed him as a footballer. It could have been different this summer. Very sad that it hasn't been.
Ollie, what do you think about Liverpool in terms of the transfer market? Do you think they need more additions as well?
Well, I think they need another defender. Personally, I mean, it's not necessarily because, I mean, I mentioned earlier Konate having started the season shakily, but they are quite light in central defence. There, Jarell Quansah was third / fourth choice central defender last season. He played a lot of games over the various competitions. He's been sold to Bayer Leverkusen, and to my mind, they need somebody in, because Joe Gomez, who's the other one who was cover for Konate and Van Dijk last season, he's had a history of injury problems. He missed the first game of the season through injury, or no, he was just coming back from injury. So they are light in that area, and Gomez is in theory able to provide cover at right back as well. So this is why they've looked at Mark Guehi at Crystal Palace as well. And they've brought in Leone from Italy, but is he 18, 19? So I thought they might actually have given him a baptism of fire rather than Ngumoha last night. But they want and need another central defender. It's fairly simple, but they also want and need another forward. It might not have looked like it, given the number of goals they've scored from limited opportunities so far this season, but it's Isak remains the top priority, and they will be, having invested clearly a lot of time and been willing to invest a lot of money in that, they will be determined, I'm sure, to get that over the line.
Okay, let's quickly move on, because I know Orney's got to go. Whilst I've got you here, David, quickly, Liverpool fans are probably screaming, what about us? Any more business for them in the final days of the transfer window? Because we've highlighted a defender potentially, and maybe even in the attacking position as well.
Well, obviously, the fact that they're in for Isak shows that they feel they need or want a little bit more in the final third of the pitch. So many people will say, oh, if that's not going to happen, will something else materialise? My instinct would be no, because Liverpool have shown in recent years, and even last summer with Martin Zubimendi, they target players because they want that player. They don't necessarily have to have that position at any expense and at the risk of compromising quality or players that they actually want. And they've proven that they've had the courage of their convictions to wait. Even in the previous regime, Virgil van Dijk, when they didn't manage to get him one summer, they then came back in the winter. And I don't think it's beyond the realms of possibility that if Liverpool don't get Isak now, maybe they look to do it in the future. So I would say, they've identified him as an opportunity as opposed to necessarily that position. And you could say they've already got their new number 9 in Hugo Ekitike. And that will be a really interesting one to watch in this last week of the window. But I don't necessarily think they'll go in for an alternative if Isak can't happen. And for the time being, I suppose they are focused on Isak. In other positions, defence. Mark Guehi is a target of theirs. And they've held initial talks with Crystal Palace. There's been no sort of offer or agreement to meet Crystal Palace's satisfaction so far. But it's not just Palace, it's Mark Guehi as well. Can they convince him, if the clubs reach an agreement, that he's going to have sufficient game time and this is the right place for him to come? Sorry, I'm being attacked here. Oh, this is ridiculous.
It's every time you talk about attackers, your dog just goes wild. I remember when we did the Arsenal one as well.
So it would be about convincing Mark Guehi as well, who is perfectly entitled to say, no, I'm going to...
What is he doing?
It's his lunchtime and he's very hungry.
Oh, is it?
And so am I.
Time for walking.
Yeah, it's within Mark Guehi's right to turn around and say, I'm going to stay and see out the final year of my contract. And again, I don't necessarily think if Liverpool don't get him that they would go in for another centre-half. They already recruited Leone and they have a strong unit there. And so, many people will listen to this and watch the last week if Liverpool don't do what certain fans want them to do and be concerned and anxious and feel they're short. But they did last summer, and Liverpool turned around and won the Premier League title. And yeah, the recruitment was needed, and they've recruited heavily this time round. But if we know anything about Liverpool now, it's that they just won't make signings just for the sake of it. They'll make them because they feel they're right. And if they're not right, they'll keep their powder dry and wait for the right opportunity in the future. So I would say, unclear, cautious about incoming business. Let's see. Clearly, doors aren't closed. However, outgoing business will be something as well. And Liverpool have shown themselves to be very good sellers, especially of young players, and maximising value, even of older players like Luis Diaz and Darwin Núñez, you could say to an extent. And so there'll be a bit of balancing in these final days. Will Harvey Elliott leave? That's a really interesting one in my eyes because he's such a talented player. He's wanted by many clubs, RB Leipzig, other teams on the continent that would present Champions League opportunities, Premier League clubs too. The star of the under-21 Euros, got very few minutes last season. But Liverpool actually have quite a tight squad and not necessarily flush with options in his position. So it's not impossible that Harvey Elliott actually stays at Liverpool, and would be great to see him play more than he did last season. But that's definitely one to watch.
Okay, what feels right is you grab some lunch, take the dog for a walk and feed that dog. Thank you so much for joining us, David. Appreciate you.
Cheers, guys.
All right, gents, honestly, let's end it there. So much drama, Newcastle and also Liverpool. Let's see how they fare in the next few games to come. George, Ollie, thanks for your time. And also, David, thank you so much for joining us as well. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Obviously, leave us a comment as well. We'll be back soon. For more from the Athletic FC podcast, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. We've got top journalists like David Ornstein, Matt Slater, Adam Crafton, Carl Anker, and plenty more through the entire season. Make sure you don't miss an episode of the Athletic FC. You can get it wherever you get your podcasts from.